Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, depending on what time you're listening to the show. We have another installment of Kingdom Talks podcast, episode 18. And I'm here with a very, very special guest by the name of Alex Kranz, or Kranz. He's a therapist here in sunny South Florida, specifically in Palm Beach County. As most of you probably already know, he is my therapist, and I'll just kind of throw that out there. And we're very excited to have this episode because there's a lot of you guys that have been asking us, mental health related questions on anxiety, depression, how to cope with death, how to cope with any type of loss, how to cope with just regular life instances that because life happens, and you lose your job, you get overwhelmed, you're going through a divorce, you got fired, all those things, that affects us in some type of way mentally. And if we don't know how to navigate through those things, it could get pretty detrimental to your growth and to your spirit and to everything else in any walk of life that you're in. So we're very excited to talk about a lot of these different topics. We're going to cover a little bit about how it correlates with drug abuse and addictions and all that good stuff. But before we get into that topic, and before I introduce Alex, I'm going to just go over some housekeeping. For those of you who are new to the show, we are available on all digital platforms. We are on Spotify, Apple, we are on Pandora as well, and also on YouTube. You can find us on Instagram at Kingdomtalks_pod. That's POD at the end. You could also find us on YouTube at Kingdom Talks. I'll obviously leave the links on the channel. I'll leave the links on the Instagram page, and I'll also provide you with the website. That's www.kingdomtalkspodcast.com. The links are available there, and you can choose where you want to listen to the show at any digital platform, whether it be Spotify, YouTube, etc., etc. Also, we do have a Cashapp at Kingdom Talks. If you guys feel led to donate, any donation is appreciated. Thank you for those last week who donated. You guys know who you are. So wanted to take care of that. And again, if you're new to the show, the podcast is on weekly every Wednesday. All right. And we're kind of keeping this a trend, a weekly trend, as well as prayer requests. I've engaged with you guys through the Instagram page, and I've been posting a lot of prayer requests, and I got 3 of them that I'd like to share with the audience, and hopefully it'll probably prompt you to kind of engage with prayer requests. I know it could get a little weird sometimes, or if you're shy and don't want to share those kind of things, but we want to encourage you to send out your prayers to the channel and to the Instagram page. So I'm going to go over 3. I'm sorry. The first one says, I'm feeling very alone. Please pray for me during this season of alone. I don't know what this gentleman is going through, but he's feeling very, very alone. Maybe he's dealing with a loss. Maybe he wasn't very specific to that prayer. But if you're single and you're looking and you haven't been able to find that one, I know how it's like. I was in the dating scene for a while, and so I know how it feels to feel alone. So if you're looking for a partner or a life partner, we're praying for you. We're praying for you. It's okay to be alone. I think alone time will give you an opportunity to find yourself, discover new things about yourself, learn some new things. But we're definitely praying for you. And I just want to encourage you to utilize this time that you are alone and you're not with anyone to become the person you want to date, if you will. So that's an encouragement that I have for you. And of course, I'm going to keep these anonymous, because I did say that I was going to keep all these anonymous. So that was from a gentleman actually he's local. He lives out in Palm Beach. So prayers out to you. The second prayer is from a mom. Oh no, from Philadelphia. Wow, from Philly. Shout outs to Philly. this person saying that his mom is going through major surgery to remove a cyst in her intestines. It is not cancerous, but it's still major surgery. Please pray. So of course, that's huge. I know that my mom has gone through her share of different procedures and medical procedures, so I know it can get a little taxing to the mental and emotions as well, especially if you're close to your mother. So we're praying and lifting your family and your mom in prayer. So thank you for that prayer request. And the last prayer request is from a young lady in San Francisco, California. Recently got divorced, not by choice, asking for peace over my family and myself during this time. That's also a pretty heavy-hearted prayer.
For sure.
I know I don't come from that background. I actually was blessed to grow up with both my parents living under the same roof. But I've had friends and close family friends and family that's gone through that season of their lives, and it must be tough for you, and especially for your family. I'm assuming you have kids involved, and that's why you specifically asked for that prayer over your family. So we're definitely praying for you, and just want to encourage you, if you're listening in and tuning in, that this is not the end. This is not the end. This is just the beginning to a new chapter of your life. I know that divorce can be ugly. It can be devastating to the family, especially when kids are involved. So, keep your head high. We're praying for you. We want to let you know that we want to intercede in that, and we want to encourage you to keep on living your life, and just be encouraged, and live your life now for your kids and for yourself, that God has something on the other side as you step into this new season in your journey that we call life. So that was the last prayer. So thank you so much for those prayers. Keep those prayer requests coming. I promise that I will read those and share those anonymously, of course. But if you're tuning in, just know that we're praying over that. I'm actively praying over those prayer requests because I hold those very special to my heart. So thank you guys for sharing those. And I want to encourage you to send us praise reports. Like if we've prayed over a prayer request from previous episodes, let us know how your life is going after you've made your prayer request, to give us an update as to how your life is going and things of that nature. So we love to get some praise reports too. But without any further ado, I'm here with Alex, my therapist, and we've actually talked about offline what mental health looks like, especially post COVID,
Sure.
and things like that. But before we jump into conversation, and I know that we're gonna have a great convo, and you're gonna be dropping a lot of knowledge to our viewership and to our audience here and our listeners here. Let's take a little bit of your time to just formally introduce yourself. Give us a little bit about yourself, what you did, what you currently do now, and just a little bit of your background, so the people that are tuning in know who you are.
Gladly. So my name's Alex Kranz. I'm a psychologist, and I practice in Palm Beach, Florida. Been practicing for about 10 years now. Before that, oddly enough, I was an attorney for about 20 years. And I always wanted to be a psychologist, but somehow I ended up in law school, and before I knew it, I was practicing. But I was always involved in homeless shelters for about maybe 10 or 15 years before I went for my master's degree in psychology. And, I loved it so much. I said to myself, why only get a master's? Why not actually, start practicing?
Right.
So about 10 years ago, I started to make the turnover from lawyer to therapist. And it's pretty much what I do now for the last maybe 5 years or so now. I've been doing primarily therapy work. I like to work in trauma, depression, and anxiety because I feel those are the areas that people in general have the most issues with today.
Yes, especially today. I'm sure even after COVID or even during COVID, you've had some type of turnaround.
Well, COVID is a great example of what mental health is not about.
Yeah.
Right? Mental health is about being plugged in with the community. When you can pray at home or you can pray at church or in any kind of house of worship, but when you're with other people and you socialize and you have that sense of being together, it's also good for you mentally, right?
Absolutely.
And what's happened over the last year and a half is people have been more isolated. And as people get more isolated, it's very difficult to know what's real. And, we can talk about the concept of dissociation, removing yourself from your emotions. But a better way of looking at it is, if you don't know what's real, then you kind of end up in a dream state. Have you ever been in a situation like that where you were so kind of
detached from reality almost?
Yeah. Like maybe after a bad breakup, if you ever had a bad breakup like that?
Absolutely.
Or you had a bad trauma, let's say somebody in your family passed away.
Right.
All of a sudden, for a while, you kind of feel like you got punched and you're not really in contact with those emotions. Well, that's life. That happens from time to time. We all have setbacks.
Right.
But when you have a kind of extended isolation from other people, you kind of lose track of your emotions.
Right.
And that's where a lot of these issues with drug and alcohol abuse and other substances really become a major issue.
Right.
Because as you isolate and you feel less in touch with your emotions, that's painful. It's depressing, it's anxiety provoking. So wouldn't a little Jack Daniels kind of take
the edge off a little bit?
The edge off a bit.
Yeah.
And that's why people get started.
Right. It's almost like a poison that they decide to take because they feel like they can numb that pain, and it's the easy way out, kind of.
Javi, it really is self-medication.
Yeah.
They're looking for a way of... Have you ever done that? Have you ever said to yourself, man, this is such an awful day.
Yeah.
I'll just have one drink and maybe I'll feel better?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially during my 20s.
Okay.
Where I was, going through the stresses of life after college, because after I dropped out of college, I just kind of was in the workforce and still trying to find my way in life, and the party scene seemed very intriguing for me, and I started meeting those class of people, and it was just a void that I tried to fill every week when I went on these ragers or when I went on these different escapades, quote unquote, just to kind of feel good and justifying it by saying, hey, I had a rough week, or hey, my girlfriend pissed me off, or hey, I'm going through it with my dad, or things like that. And I would just kind of run to the bar, to that scene, to just let loose and forget about reality for that split moment of time.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. So in the short run, it seems like it makes sense. It takes the edge off. It allows you to socialize. You kind of forget your troubles.
Right.
But if you put enough days together, you get a week, and you put enough weeks together, you get a month. And this becomes a pattern over time.
Right.
And what happens is you start drinking because you're trying to numb out pain. It's not only for the excitement anymore. It's also because you're dealing with pain of depression, anxiety, trauma, etc.
Right.
And over time, it takes hold of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully, for me, it was something that became sickening for me. Like I was sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Right, that's exactly right.
So I was slowly coming to a realization that this is not the life that I want to lead.
Right, but you also have a very supportive family, from what I recall.
Correct.
So even though you knew you were going down the wrong track, I bet you also knew you could change the track or the road you're on.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of folks out there who don't necessarily have that level of
family
support.
structure.
Let's call it support.
Or support system,
Let's call it support for now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, forget about family. You always need that, but we don't have that modern day, life either.
Yeah.
So as you move away from support, the alienation becomes more real and it becomes more painful. Which is why, particularly in people out there who have alcohol and substance abuse issues will probably relate to this. Which is why a lot of times as the addiction gets worse, are you drinking by yourself or you're drinking with a group?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Are you drugging by yourself or with a group? No, you're doing it by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's isolation that's the recipe for disaster.
Right.
When you start isolating yourself while you're self-medicating, that's just a recipe for complete disaster. Because you're not only destroying yourself, but you're destroying the people around you that want to say, hey, I care for John, and I care for John so much, but John's actions and how he's dealing with his addiction is affecting us, and we can't seem to help.
Well, you're exactly right. Isolation is always bad, but you also have people who feel isolated because they actually are isolated. That's one of the things that we forget as a dynamic in any kind of substance abuse. There are people out there who really don't have friends or family.
Right.
For whatever reason, they may not be that sociable, or they work maybe out of their home and they don't really have an opportunity to interact much with other people. And the reality is that they need to make concrete changes to their life in order to break that cycle of isolation. And that's a lot harder than pouring a stiff one.
Yeah, it sure is. Because it's easy to go out to your local bar and tip a few.
Well, it's even easier to stay home.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people do. And, you know, we talk about an addiction being, you know, chemical to the brain. But I have a different way of looking at it. An addiction is like a habit, right? I'm an old guy.
Yeah.
And back in the 70s, people would ask you what kind of a habit you have, right?
Right.
Well, an addiction is basically a habit.
Yeah.
You do it often enough, you get used to doing it.
Yeah.
And that's true of anything.
And I think everyone has a vice, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
You know, I deal with a lot of patients that have, you know, sex addiction or pornography addiction on the internet.
Right.
And you know how we break that? We stop.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a matter of finding the willpower to do so, right? And how do you encourage someone to find that willpower to just stop, like you said? Just simply stop.
Well, the way I do it in my therapy sessions is we recognize that there's a problem. Do you have a problem with alcohol?
Right. Or any addiction.
Or with any addiction, right? I mean, do you find that you're drinking or drugging often? Is this affecting your home life? Is this affecting your work? Is this affecting your relationship? Are there people telling you that we're going to leave you, we're going to fire you
Right.
if you keep this up? Okay, well, do you have a problem?
Right.
And then when you recognize you have a problem, the beauty is once you recognize you have a problem and you're no longer running and hiding anymore, you have a decision to make. Am I going to make a change, or am I going to let, you know, reality bring me down?
Right.
Can we change reality? Like you read off, I think, a prayer of somebody who feels alone and isolated right now.
Yeah.
It's a great idea to pray for that person. You could really use the prayer.
Right.
But the real truth is that he needs to get out there, or she needs to get out there.
Yeah.
And make concrete changes to why he or she is isolated.
Right.
So when I'm with a patient, we start talking about, okay, so we know that there's an addiction issue.
Yeah.
And we know that addiction's not working for you.
Right.
When do you want to make that change?
Do
you want to waste another year or two?
Right.
Maybe wait until you get a DUI?
Right, yeah.
Maybe see if you end up in jail.
Right.
Would that work better? Maybe your wife or your husband will leave you, and then maybe we'll get the message.
Right.
Or we can decide to do something now.
Yeah, and avoid the chaos.
Well, avoid the pain.
Or avoid the pain and the ramifications that comes after those actions that
Right.
you're, you know, partaking in.
Well, and the reason that I use the term pain is because oftentimes what you find is that anyone with a substance abuse issue really is drugging or drinking because they're trying to avoid pain.
Right.
There's a reason why they've started to isolate and not deal with the realities of their life.
Yeah.
And what I always tell my patients is, look, I've never met anyone that didn't like to drink. Do you like to drink?
Yeah, I like a glass here and there.
We all like to drink.
Yeah, we do.
But you don't drink every damn night because you're not trying to avoid a particular pain in your
Right.
life.
Yeah.
So now that we decided that we're going to deal with our alcohol or our drug addiction, what are we covering? I work with a lot of patients where, and we call this a trigger, by the way.
Yeah.
What is the trigger for the alcohol or the drug use?
Yeah.
And you'd be amazed how often the trigger is family.
Yeah.
Or the trigger is friends. Or the trigger is this sense of being, you know, ignored or poorly treated or...
So any type of trauma can result into a trigger.
Oftentimes
Right?
it's a trauma.
Yeah.
So, you know, for example, I work with a lot of patients now that are veterans, right? And it's always an honor to work with a veteran. And oftentimes there are alcohol and drug abuse issues. Not all, but often.
Yeah.
And what we find more than anything is that there are traumas that they may have gone through during the war that were never really dealt with. And one of their ways of kind of numbing out the pain from the trauma is to drug.
Right.
Or maybe after they got back from, serving overseas, the relationship, the marriage isn't going so well.
Yeah.
And instead of dealing with some of the underlying issues, they decide to drink. But all kinds of substance abuse ultimately is about avoiding pain.
Right.
That's why we isolate, by the way.
Yeah.
That's the real reason we isolate, because we want to avoid pain.
Right.
And it's not only about drug addiction, right?
Right.
I think we've talked about this before. But let's say, Javi wakes up in the morning and you got a little stomach pain going on.
Yeah.
So you're kind of touching your abdomen and you're saying, this doesn't feel right. What's going on here?
Right.
So, you talk to some friends, your girlfriend, family members, and you decide that you're going to call the doctor. So you call doctor whoever, right? And the doctor says, yeah, come on in today, 4 p.m., we'll see you. So what do you think happens while you're driving to the doctor's office to see Dr. Alex?
Maybe during the car ride there, your pain goes away.
Yeah, it kind of goes away.
Yeah.
At least you think
it does, yeah.
Because you don't want to deal with
the pain.
Right. And then when you go to the doctor, if the doctor has any good training, the doctor is slowly going to reach for your abdomen.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
You're going to avoid.
You're going to avoid it.
The
because
contact.
you don't want to be in pain.
Yeah.
You get it?
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is we constantly isolate from the pain because we don't want to deal with the pain.
Right.
But if you do this often enough, what will happen to your pain?
It'll go away.
No,
it won't go away.
It'll
get worse. Yeah.
It'll get worse until you're in an emergency situation.
Exactly.
And that's what addiction is. And addiction really is about trying to numb out the pain because you hope and pray it'll go away.
It'll go away, but you're just.
But it won't.
It won't, because you're just kind of creating more layered pain, because there's pain, and then you're creating more pain on top of the pain.
You are. You're making the pain worse. Or another way I look at it would be to ask you a question, Javi. When was the last time you ignored a problem that got better?
None.
Right? I mean, can you think of any?
No, 0 times.
Yeah, it never happens, right?
No, yeah. And also with the isolation, right? I meant to ask you earlier, is there a difference between physically being isolated and emotionally being isolated? When you still feel a sense of alone, but you're not alone because you're with family or you're with a good group of people, but you isolate yourself emotionally, you detach yourself emotionally from this core group of people that care and love you. Is there a difference between being alone and not having anyone, and having people but still feeling alone? Is there a difference?
I would say that's a really great question. There is a difference. In my mind, when you're actually physically alone, you also develop the stress of not really having anyone to talk to or socialize in any way.
Yeah.
There are plenty of people who are in relationships but feel totally alone.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
I work with a lot of marital couples. I do a lot of marital counseling.
Yeah.
And sometimes one of the parties will have a drug addiction. And what I'm always astonished by is, let's say the husband has an alcohol addiction and I'm meeting with the wife.
Yeah.
The wife will talk to me endlessly about how incredibly alone and isolated she feels in the marriage.
Wow.
And it's one of the things that I try and bring out during the marital counseling, that, it's not only about stopping the drug addiction because it's ruining your life, and it's affecting your health, and you're going to get a DUI, and you're going to lose your job, but you're also driving your partner crazy.
Yeah.
And if you care.
Right.
So all isolation ultimately is emotional. If you isolate from other people, you aren't able to interact with other people.
Yeah.
Eventually, you'll start to isolate from your own emotions.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you ever look at any research on people that go to solitary confinement,
right?
I'm not a big fan of solitary confinement.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any study that hasn't shown that people start having psychotic breakdown within 24 hours. It's that quick.
Yeah.
So look at it this way: if somebody has a bit of a psychotic meltdown after 24 hours being in solitary confinement, what do you think that does to somebody emotionally?
Right.
When they go weeks and months and years feeling alone.
That's crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is why addiction is so closely associated
with
isolation.
Yeah. And just mental health in general.
Well, the more you isolate, the more mentally unhealthy you'll be.
You'll be,
Because you won't have that socialization. You won't have that stability.
Right. So it's always encouraged to find good people to associate yourself with. That people that will push you, people that would drive you, people that would encourage you. I think community is a big deal, isn't it?
I believe entirely. Once you recognize that there's an issue that has to be dealt with,
Yeah.
and that you're willing to deal with that pain,
Yeah.
we have to deal with it, right? You have
Yeah.
to. You go to the doctor, and the
Right.
doctor says, "Well, you've got a cyst.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's work on it."
Let's
Well,
work.
that means surgery, right?
Right.
But then after that, there's recuperation,
Right.
there's rehabilitation.
So what does your recovery look like after? Yeah.
So the recovery's got to be once we start dealing with the pain, and that could be from family, it could be from friends, it could be from a relationship,
Yeah.
it could be from your childhood. Who knows? Once we start dealing with that pain, well, how are we going to make it better?
Yeah.
All right, so somebody wants to pray because they feel lonely. All right, so what are we doing to maybe join a local basketball
Right.
pickup game?
Yeah.
What are we doing to maybe, I don't know, go to church?
Right.
Or spend some time,
Yeah.
going out there and socializing with other people.
in a healthy way. Yeah. And I think healthy social circles is so key for me personally. When I got plugged into a church, and then after I got plugged into a church, I actually started getting plugged into small groups and meeting new people, meeting like-minded people, and just
Right.
talking life and talking dreams and talking ambitions and talking failures as well. Getting really personal and intimate with a core group of people does something to you, psych-wise.
Well, did you have a better sense of what you believed
Yeah.
in the more you talked about it?
Right,
And the more
right.
you shared?
Yeah, because I think it helps you find your purpose too.
Yep.
Because you have people praying for you, especially if you're in a church community or in a church environment. A lot of these pastors anywhere will literally be advocates of community. They want you to do community. They want you to get plugged in. They want you to do what they call life together, because biblically you thrive better as a church family, rather than you isolating yourself and not doing much of anything productive wise or even socially wise.
Okay.
So a lot of pastors will encourage people to get plugged into small groups, because in those small groups you can really find yourself, discover new things about yourself, have a sense of family. A lot of people in America today don't really have the structured family how you saw it, growing up.
Sure.
The family dynamic looks a lot different than it did 50 years ago. Today, families look a lot different than they did 50 years ago.
So, Javi, do I hear you saying that you can create a family?
Yeah. I
That's
think
a really important point.
that's a very, very. I feel like creating a church family or any family, when friends become family, I think it just puts you in position to really breathe life into your own self, but breathe life into others.
Well, can you share your feelings with your friends?
Absolutely.
And will they kind of share their own
Yeah.
thoughts and sense about what you're feeling?
Yeah, and I actually texted Tyler. Shouts to Tyler. He's like our co-resident co-host here. So Tyler, if you're listening, and he knows. Tyler, I text Tyler whenever I feel a little bit troubled or I'm overwhelmed and I need like that guy encouragement. I'll text a guy like Tyler or a couple of guys that I have and say, hey man, I'm kind of not feeling myself today. I need encouragement. I need prayer. Can you just keep me in prayer? And within minutes, they'll send me a quick quote, words of affirmation, maybe a Bible verse, or a simple, yo, bro, I got you. I'm praying for you right now.
And you met Tyler at your church?
And I met Tyler at my church.
How long ago?
Literally like a year and a half ago.
I love it. It's a perfect point.
Yeah.
So as you've moved forward with your life and found more stability and moving toward your goals in life,
Yeah.
would you say that's been over the last year and a half, 2 years?
Yeah.
And has the church been part of that?
Absolutely. My
Yeah.
church community has been a part of that. Yeah.
And your close buddies in the church, like Tyler,
Yeah.
have been part of that as well.
Yep.
Do you kind of see the connection between you joining the church, socializing, making intimate friends like Tyler, and you moving forward in your goals?
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I think that people that are listening in now that find themselves alone, because I'm sure that he's not the only one that feels that way, because I felt that way, a lot of us felt alone even
Sure.
when we came from quote unquote great families or a good family structure or a family that's not broken with both parents under the same roof and they still feel alone. If you're listening and you're feeling alone, it's not the end. I think that when you start making tweaks in your life and you become intentional with meeting new people, getting plugged into a church, maybe if you can't find a church, I mean, there's a thing called Google now that you could literally
Right.
Google a church at your close proximity of wherever you're at. So I think there's no such thing as excuses anymore when it comes to that intentionality. Like if you really want to seek something, whether it be a new circle of friends or a life partner, I think that you have to be intentional about that and just quit pouting.
Totally agree.
And it's okay to pout and get in your feelings and let all that emotion out, but it's not okay to stay there. It's
I
not,
would agree. Yeah,
it's not okay to stay there.
Emotionally, you have to have that sense of touching the pain, just like with the doctor.
Yeah,
But once you touch the pain, you have to decide what you're going to do.
right.
Life really is ultimately about making decisions, right?
Exactly.
So you kind of figure where you're going to go from here.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, what we've ignored is really the stressors that make us sick.
Yeah.
And the corollary, the opposite of that, is what makes us sick actually can make us strong.
Yeah.
Because, for example, you're a perfect example. The more you got involved in the church and the more you made friends in the church, the more you had a sense of what you wanted to do. How long have you had this podcast now?
I think I'm not even a year old yet.
Right, but do you see a connection between you kind of dealing with some of the issues that you had emotionally, and you making progress in church and with your friends, and you being here today?
Right. Yeah.
Again,
that's like the byproduct of those good decisions.
Could you have done this 5 years ago?
Possibly not, because I was in a different mental state, in a different season of my life.
And maybe talking about some of the issues and difficulties you had in the past would have brought you pain.
Right.
And you would have tried to cover that pain.
Yep.
But here you are exposing your pain.
Yeah.
And that's because you're stronger.
Yeah. Amen to that. Praise God for that. But yeah, it's just something that I will always want to just kind of throw out there to the listeners and the viewers is that it's okay to not feel okay. It's just not okay to stay there.
You got it.
And I want to encourage people to seek for help. And if it's something that you need professional help for, I was one that didn't believe in that. And here I am sitting next to Alex, who is a psychologist and he does what he does. And it's not just substance abuse. It's just not, mental health, but it's also what we talked about and touched on earlier is anxiety and these things that we start to see a lot is people, going to psych wards, people going to different medical attentions and getting these medications like Xanax and all these other medicines to treat anxiety and depression, these antidepressants and stuff like that. And I, for one, feel that that's become the norm now. People are on medication for it and stuff like that. I don't know how you feel about that, but before it even gets to that point, wouldn't you would say that it is encouraged to seek professional help before it gets to that point?
Well, I definitely believe that for some people, antidepressants and anti-anxieties are a lifesaver, which is like almost godly.
Yeah.
There are people who there's always a chemical element to anything you feel emotionally, right? Because your emotions are affected by neurons and by neurotransmitters and synapses of all kind.
Right.
So there'll always be that chemical factor. And I think for some people, they definitely need to be on antidepressants and anti-anxieties.
Right.
But we should really look at depression and anxiety as being a symptom of an overall illness. And when you have a symptom, you try and find out what's causing it, right? So, let's say we go back to that doctor example, and you go to your doctor and you have pain in your abdomen, and they find that there's a cyst in your colon somewhere, and they have to do an operation. mean, don't you think it would be a good idea for the doctor to maybe explain how that happened?
Right.
Maybe there's a family history of colon cancer. Maybe there's a family history of diverticulitis and other illnesses of the digestive tract. Well, you need to look into that. It's not only a question of having the surgery or taking the right medication. Where is the depression coming from? Anxiety is a feeling of being overwhelmed and frustrated.
Right.
How long have you felt that way?
Right.
Did you feel overwhelmed and frustrated as a child? Where did you learn that from?
Right.
Oh, your dad was frustrated and overwhelmed. Well, how did that make you feel?
Right.
What would you do when your mom and dad were arguing? Oh, you'd go to your room.
Right.
You're kind of isolated, right?
Yeah.
How did that work for you?
Right.
Well, this is the kind of thing that we kind of go into.
Yeah.
Oh, medication definitely has its role.
Right.
But I think you need to have real therapy as well to get a better understanding of what's going on.
Exactly. Like almost like finding the origins to where the anxiety came from.
Right. You take your car into a mechanic shop, and you probably know a lot about cars. I know a lot about cars, so they tell you we have to change a CV boot.
Right.
Well, no. Why do we have to change the CV boot? What happened? Oh, you've been going over sidewalks a lot. I got it.
Got it.
That's probably an issue, right?
Right. Right.
So you need to know what caused that particular symptom.
Yeah.
If you don't know what caused that symptom, it'll just keep coming back.
Right. So you think anxiety and just depression and all these other things are instilled by the environment that you grew up in as a child?
I believe that anxiety, depression, anger, frustration, for the most part, are very much learned behaviors.
They're all learned behaviors.
Yeah, that's not to say there aren't people who are from a family history of being depressed. That's for certain. There are people like that.
Right.
But even that is a development of a culture, right?
Right.
So let's say, I'm just going to make this up, but let's say somebody grew up in New Jersey, and dad was from Cuba,
right?
And let's say mom was from Mexico, right? Hardworking family growing up in New York, New Jersey, but mom and dad's first language was Spanish,
right?
And culturally they're Hispanic. Do you think that young, we'll make up a name, young Jimmy, might have some cultural aspects of Hispanic culture? Yeah. And maybe young Jimmy knows Spanish as a first or second language. Yeah. And maybe if there's a cultural way of expressing yourself in Hispanic culture, maybe he picked up on that as well. Right. Well, that's everything that goes into psychology as well. So if mom and dad tend to argue a lot, and dad loses his top all the time and screams and yells and fights, do you think that might affect the way young Jimmy relates to his first girlfriend? Especially when they're very, very young and they're exposed to that so young, because they're so impressionable. It looks normal. And it looks normal, and they find it to be normal. And then as they grow up, they become yellers and screamers to their friends. And then as they get older and get into romantic relationships, they become yellers and screamers to their significant others. So let me tell you a funny story. I was working at I was doing volunteer work at a homeless shelter. And there was this very nice kid who had a substance abuse issue. Yeah. And if I remember right, he was from the mountains of Kentucky, real Appalachian mountains, middle of nowhere. And he wanted to join a church. And I told him, I think that's a great idea. It's a good way of socializing, getting in touch with your spirituality, having support. Yeah. His big problem was he didn't like any of the churches down here because they didn't have that kind of old-fashioned home feel of a real church, of a real Appalachian-style church. Right. So you want to know anything about his church in Kentucky? No. I'm not making this up. They had like snakes. And part of what they did was that they were into kind of snake charming because there was something in the Bible about how if you believe in me, you won't die. Right, right. So he kind of related that kind of culture with church. Right. So you see my point? Yeah, yeah. You kind of take that in and you look at it as being normal. And I'm not putting down, snake charming or whatever it is, snake handling. Maybe it works, I don't know. Right. But the point is, he related to church life in terms of a kind of charismatic energy, which you don't typically find down here, right? And it affected the way he looked at the churches here. Wow. So you kind of take everything that you have as a little kid, mom and dad arguing, the culture, having relationships where people don't share their emotions. Instead,
Right.
they blow up.
Yeah.
And then you kind of put this into your own adult behavior, but it doesn't work, just like it didn't work for mom and dad.
Yeah.
What ends up happening is you have your own frustrating and upsetting relationship.
Yeah.
And that's the trigger. Well, what did your dad do? Well, my dad drank. Well, what do you do? I drank.
Yeah. Right.
You see this over and over again.
Yeah.
But if you don't study it and you don't really come to understand where it's coming from,
Right.
where the symptoms are coming from,
Yeah.
well, you'll just spend your entire life on anti-anxieties
Yeah.
and antidepressants, then you'll never fix it.
Right.
So you'll be a little bit less depressed, but you'll still be frustrated and angry.
Right. Wow. That is true. That is so true. It's like almost learning yourself.
You got it.
Learning yourself and having a master's in that or a
Right.
PhD in that.
Which you should, right?
You should,
know
right?
yourself, right?
Yeah. And some people just refuse not to. Like I know I refused it or avoided it
Well, it's
because
painful,
it's painful.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because don't you kind of have to
And
admit-
sometimes it's shameful too to share some of the things that you went through.
Sure.
You could be ashamed of it.
Sexual abuse,
Yeah.
physical abuse,
Yeah.
emotional abuse. Dad used to hit mom all the time.
Right. All those traumas and abuse could really do something to you mentally, emotionally.
But what if I tell you all those traumas that we kind of run from? Well, it's no different than George and Brian and Bob down the road. In fact, your best buddy that
Mm-hmm.
you used to hang out with until 11 o'clock every night, he was staying out of the home for the same damn reason.
Right. Yeah.
So again, we isolate
Yeah.
because we're afraid, and we don't realize that what we're going through is exactly what everyone else is going through.
Right.
So if we were to actually touch our pain,
Mhm.
go to the doctor, seek therapy,
Yeah.
and socialize, we'd
Right.
find that there are 1,000,001 other people who understand where we're coming from.
Right.
I bet you at that church you're going to, there are people that you can kind of relate to,
Absolutely.
who understand some of the, issues that you may have had, right?
Right. Right. Because it's good to share and also good to just listen to other people's perspectives.
Mhm.
And the more different perspectives that you come across, but through the dialogue that you may be having with the said group or just
Mhm.
one person, depending on how comfortable you are. I was always considered a social bee, so I liked
Okay.
the group setting. Other people don't like the group setting; they like more of the one-on-one. So they'll develop a mentor and
Right.
say, "Hey, Rob has become my mentor, and I feel very comfortable talking to Rob about certain things, and it's helped me a lot. It's helped me to be more driven. It's helped me to find a job. Whatever the case may be. But you can only get there if, like how we spoke earlier and touched on earlier, is only if you're intentional about it and getting plugged into the right places, into the right source. And I for one, the source for me is God, and that God happens to be Jesus, and
Mhm.
He's helped me find the community and the church family that I was able to find. And once I got plugged into that source, it became fruitful. It's becoming fruitful, and it's just put me in a better position where I'm not alone and frustrated and angry all the time, because
Mhm.
now I can bounce off those emotions to that small group of people that I can trust in my church, and obviously going to you has definitely opened a new window, a new horizon, if you will, to look at certain things
Sure.
different. Because I always encourage people to seek therapy, because it's great to have, and I didn't see this until I started going to therapy, is it's great to have an objectivity from a person that doesn't know you from a can of paint.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's something that I encourage. And so if you're listening to this show right now and you're looking for a sign, this is your sign to go seek help and see people like Alex in that profession, because it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's
Mhm.
definitely been a game changer for me, and I know that if you're listening, it'll be a game changer for you. So I really wanted to kind of touch on
Sure.
that, because a lot of people, especially young adults today, because I'm sure you deal with a lot of young adults from the ages of 21 to 35, right?
I do. I mean, I think the point that you're really making is that when we touch our pain
Mhm.
and we admit weakness, we can build our strength.
Yeah,
It's part of that contrast, right?
right.
When we admit a pain, we can seek healing.
Yeah,
when we know we have a weakness, we can work on strength.
Right.
And yeah, so I see a lot of people of all ages. I think many people nowadays who really feel isolated are in that 20 to 30 bracket because a lot of the socialization they had was when they would go to work.
Right.
And there's still a lot of people that are not going back to work. They're still working from their home.
Right.
And I would say in that age group between 20s and 30s, we're seeing a tremendous amount of depression and anxiety.
Yeah, and I also read this crazy statistic, and I forget to outsource it, so I'm not going to even make up where I got it from, but I got it off the internet, and it was talking about the suicide rate getting it peaked after COVID, and one of the reasons as to why it peaked is because of isolation, but then another reason is because the 20 to 35-year-old bracket are on their freaking phones on social media. And they were saying that social media is causing depression, and which breeds suicidal thoughts, which breeds ultimately people committing suicide because they just find themselves in this make-believe world that they see on Instagram. Because honestly, and we touched on this on previous episodes when we talked about social media, but all you do is just see people's highlights on social media, and then you trick your mind, or you groom yourself to think that that's reality and that's the life that you should live.
Right.
And anything short from that, you're worthless. And then you get to that place where you're depressed, you're comparing yourself to a social media highlight reel because someone's out in Dubai having their greatest time of their life, and they think that that's their everyday life. And so that was an interesting statistic to see that social media has affected that demographic so drastically in the last 5 years, which is scary, because 5 years ago was not that long ago.
Physically, mentally healthy people interact and socialize. And when you move away from that and you go into what I call socialization light, which is what the internet is really all about, you move away.
You kind of detach yourself from reality, right?
Right, you detach yourself from reality and from support. I mean, the reality is, if 99% of those people were just electronic bots that didn't even exist, you would never know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have no way of knowing.
Right.
And they don't really know you, and you don't really know them.
Yeah.
So it kind of highlights that feeling of isolation. But getting back to one of the original points that I made, the way you really support mental health is by doing things that bring you in line with your beliefs. And your beliefs are in part based on how you socialize and the kind of friendships you make.
Right.
So for the holidays coming up, if you could just find 2 or 3 things that you want to do as a short-term goal that will help you socialize and interact with other people, it'll make a tremendous difference in terms of your sense of anxiety and depression over the holidays.
Nice.
So I worked with a couple not that long ago. Husband was an alcoholic, and the wife felt incredibly alone. And in her case, right, she wanted to get involved in art, so she found an art class.
Okay.
She wanted to get involved in being more physically fit, so she found a class that she could do for that.
Fitness, right.
Physical fitness. And I think the third thing was she wanted to learn to play golf. Because she had been, in Florida for all these years as a retired woman.
Right.
And she had never played golf before.
Right.
So she ended up joining a golf team, doing some local aerobic class, and taking some art classes. And you know what the result was of all that? Like a month later, she called me and she said, "Alex, I really love you, but I don't need to see you anymore."
Yeah. Because I think you find your sense of purpose when you start dabbling into new things, right?
You start interacting and you start seeing yourself in other people, and people support you.
Yeah.
And maybe you never felt comfortable talking about your husband being an alcoholic, but then you talk to your friend Mildred, and Mildred's telling you about how her husband's an alcoholic. Now you don't feel so much shame.
Right.
And that's what happens. We feel this sense of shame and fear, and we isolate. And then when we isolate, the pain in your stomach gets worse.
Right.
Because you have no one, you don't even want to tell the doctor.
Yeah,
oh my God, I'm not going to tell the doctor. What will the doctor feel? What will the doctor think?
Right.
So we nurse it, we hold on to it. Well, that's a hell of a lot of pain for you, Javi. What are you going to do to control the pain?
Right.
How are you going to make that pain any better?
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to drink.
Yeah. Wow.
So a lot of this stuff is about just getting out there, and you don't have to change your life.
Right.
Completely. You don't have to become a Buddhist monk.
Yeah, you don't have to take like drastic measures to do the things that are gonna help you.
Right. Find 2 or 3 things that you feel can make your life better.
Right.
And then try and do 1 this month.
Yeah.
1 the month after.
Yeah.
And 1 the next month.
Yeah.
Being physically fit typically makes you feel better.
Right.
Right. Physically and emotionally.
Right.
So even if it's just taking a walk twice a day.
Right. Or even a cycling class. I mean, cycling classes are everywhere now in South Florida, especially if you're in South Florida.
Right. Cycling classes are one example.
Yeah.
You've always felt that you had a talent with words. You always felt that maybe poetry was something you'd be interested in. You can't take 1 class on poetry.
Right. Right. Yeah. Journaling has helped me when I was seeing you on a weekly basis. I started seeing you.
We did the gratitude journaling.
The gratitude journaling. So for those who are listening, if you want to take some practical steps to get better at this struggle of feeling overwhelmed, feeling angst, having panic attacks, if you want to experience less episodes of those so-called panic attacks, anxiety attacks, or what have you, I would encourage those who are listening to start doing that. Be intentional with journaling, writing things down. You remember when you told me to write my thoughts down too?
Right.
Certain things that would make me feel a certain way, and things like that.
The idea was that oftentimes we're not really in touch with the way we feel.
Right.
Because we spend so much time isolating and avoiding the way we feel. So my advice to a lot of my patients is start writing down the way you feel. But if you have difficulty kind of being in contact with feeling blue or overwhelmed, sad, let's start writing down the way you think.
Right.
Because if you understand what your thoughts are,
they'll
always lead you to your feelings.
Yeah.
So I said, or Javi says to me, "Hey Alex, how are you feeling today?" And I say, "I don't know. I can't really tell you the way I feel, Javi." "Well, what have you been thinking about?" "Well, I've been thinking about the fact that, my wife just got the COVID shot and she's feeling really sick, and I had to pick up the kids from school, and I had to cancel a whole bunch of patients." And then Javi, my friend, looks at me and says, "Alex, I think you feel frustrated and overwhelmed." That's right. I do feel frustrated and overwhelmed. You see how that works?
Right.
Now, oftentimes you may not be in contact with your feeling, your emotion, but you know the way you think.
Yeah.
And you can't have a feeling or an emotion without a thought.
Wow.
The thought always determines where the feeling will take you.
Yeah.
So you felt you were late to every appointment today, and then you weren't able to get all your assignments done at work. Javi, you must feel kind of frustrated, right?
Yeah.
Ah.
Or a bit overwhelmed.
Or a bit overwhelmed.
Or a bit of all the above at times.
So keeping a journal where you have an idea of what your thoughts are will help you get a better understanding of what your feelings are.
Right.
And then if you keep a gratitude journal, what I love about the gratitude journal is that there's always something to be grateful for. You'd think that after 4 or 5 days you couldn't come up with anything new.
Yeah.
But there's always something new.
Yeah, always. Because it actually helps you kind of shift your perspective.
Exactly.
Your perspective shifts when you are grateful for the roof over your head. When you're grateful for my friend Tyler, for example. When you're grateful for your coworker that always looks out for you, always checks in on you, and gets you that random cup of coffee on a Friday.
And what about all the things that emanate from that relationship with Tyler?
Right.
The fact that you grow spiritually, the fact that you meet people that have incredible value in your life. There are all of these flowers and buddings that come from one particular blessing that you may have.
Yeah.
It goes on forever.
Yeah. And I want to hear more feel-good stories, and rather than people chiming in and saying, "Hey man, I'm really dealing with this, that, and the third. I'm really dealing with this addiction that I have. I'm really I'm doing so much, but I feel like I'm always like landing flat on my face. I know a buddy years ago, he relapsed more than a handful of times. He just couldn't get it. He kept going to rehab, started doing the first 12 steps,
Right.
and then 6 months later he relapsed and went to North Carolina to this huge facility where they were known to be the magic bullet. They
Right.
had good turnaround, like some crazy stat that 85% of our patients never do relapse. I don't know how true that was, but it was a way of promoting their facility because they were known for that over in North Carolina. So he took a flight. Well, he didn't take a flight. His family got the money together and flew him out there, and he did well because he was taken away from what he's used to, his circle of friends that he's used to, that are comfortable with him doing drugs and a bunch of yes men, right? Well, he got plucked out of that environment and put into a whole new environment in this facility. Of course he's going to do well, right? So he did well, and he got into the halfway house program where they can live at a halfway home, and they could actually go get a job. So he got a job, and he was being a productive, member to society. I mean, he was doing all these things, and he got on this high, right? On this high of life, like, wow, I'm really getting the hang of this. I'm working, I'm in the workforce. I got a nice pad here at this halfway house, and he had his own, dorm, and he was living the dorm life for a while. He was doing well. He saved up a couple bucks, felt like, hey, I think I'd go back to sunny South Florida. Came back, met a couple of his old friends, and literally within weeks he relapsed.
Almost guaranteed. And the reason for that is that even if you learn the 12 steps, and even if you go to a rehab program and you do well in the rehab program, if it doesn't change the inner workings of your emotions and your isolation and what the fear is and what the triggers are for the actual drug use,
right,
ultimately you go back to the exact same behavior.
That is nuts.
So when I used to, because I've done a lot of addiction work at homeless shelters and at rehab centers.
Yeah.
And one of the examples I used to give, which, when I did groups, the kids would love this. I would tell them, well, let's say if instead of taking you out of the rehab center and, you go back to Florida to your friends, let's move you to Saudi Arabia, where you're living in a devoutly Muslim country, where if you have a drink of alcohol or a drug, they cut off your hand. How long you think it would take before you start going back to your drugs and alcohol?
Right.
Well, none. I don't want to lose a hand.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the point.
Yeah.
The point is, people go back to behaviors which make them feel comfortable because it's a way of guarding the pain.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I'm over here in a 5-star resort with the best food and brunches every Sunday, yeah, I can keep my rehab up. I can keep myself clean and sober.
Right.
But when I go to realities, inside of my head,
right,
I'm still the same Alex, drunkard, alcoholic.
Right.
So I go back to those specific behaviors again.
Right.
Which is why a lot of these addiction programs really don't work.
Okay. Do you think that it's maybe a starting point and then you have to
Yes, I do.
Yeah, it's a starting point,
That's
right?
a good way of looking at it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, once you stop the alcohol and the drug abuse, because you can't do that and live a successful and happy life.
Right.
But once you go into sobriety, we need to figure out why we went down that road to begin with. What were we trying to do?
Right.
What pain were we trying to numb out?
Yeah.
Why were we looking to be accepted?
Right.
And supported by people? Did we not feel support in our overall life, in our family life, in our personal life?
Because I always wondered, because I had friends that were battling addictions, and I always wondered why the 12 steps never worked, or sometimes it did work, but it was more like a Band-Aid.
Well, I'd say this: the 12 steps definitely can work.
Right.
And for some people, again, just like with medications, it can be a lifesaver.
Yeah.
But there's 12 steps that are done superficially, where you don't really look deep down inside and try and find out
Yeah.
The motivating factors.
Because sometimes 12 steps isn't enough to certain people, right?
And then there are, doing it really deeply. But, another point I would always make when I would do groups at these rehab centers is that I'm not an alcoholic, I'm not a drug addict, I never have been. But I'm teaching this class, I'm doing this group today.
Right.
And I couldn't tell you what the 12 steps are if you asked me to. But I'm sure you over there probably know the 12 steps backwards and forwards.
Right.
So why are you in rehab?
That's just like the
beyond,
$1 million question, right?
It goes beyond just the 12 steps. It also goes into the very issue of what's the motivating factor for the abuse. And you need to know that. What's your secret that makes you feel so much pain?
Right.
I was abandoned by my father. I was sexually abused by my
uncle,
sister, my uncle, what have you.
Yeah.
But we need to know what set up that pattern that made you feel safer with your emotions over here and you over there.
Wow.
But until we figure that out, whenever you're in a situation where you're overwhelmed, you're always going to go over to the drugs and the alcohol.
Yeah.
Well, the 12 steps work really well if you really understand them fundamentally and you use them to try and make those changes and deal with the fear and the pain.
Yeah.
But if you're not going to do that, and most people never do, by the way,
right,
it ain't going to work.
Right. And I think you have an upper hand too when you get in touch with your spiritual.
Sure.
With spirituality, when you have a higher power to believe in.
I agree.
That'll kind of give you a more of a puncher's.
Well, you have to have faith, right? I mean, if you really believe that there's no reason to live and that what you do in this world doesn't make any sense, and I'm in a ton of pain, right? All this pain in my stomach and my abdomen, maybe Jack Daniels makes more sense than God.
Right.
Because I don't believe in God anyhow.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I think faith does have a tremendous value.
Absolutely.
But it's got to be real faith. It can't just be recitation of prayers because you feel that if you say, a Hail Mary,
it's going to change things.
Because it may not.
Right.
The example I always give in my private practice is that you may realize that you're overweight and you run up a flight of stairs and you can't
breathe.
You can't, catch your breath.
Right.
But once you realize that, don't you have to do something?
Right, yeah.
Maybe see a doctor, maybe lose some weight, maybe go to the gym.
Right.
So a prayer is a great idea, but a prayer isn't going to change 20 years of smoking.
Right.
And a prayer is not going to change 35 years of, ignoring the lump in your breast.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the way it works.
Right.
You got to do more than just prayer. You have to have action.
Yeah.
So in my mind, prayer and religion is about a belief. Mm-hmm. What I want to see with my patients, I think you probably agree, is I want to see spirituality, because to me, spirituality is action.
Absolutely.
You probably have a better hold of that than I do.
Yeah, and I mean, I always tell myself and others that for me, when I kind of took the concept of religion and religious things, religious traditions, and I applied my spiritual sense into having a relationship with the God that I believe in, it changed everything for me. Because before I took, my faith serious, I just looked at religion and the Bible as a rule book of things not to do and what you shouldn't do and the things that you ought to do and practice and yada, yada, yada. It became a rule book. And that kind of doesn't bring me in spiritually. But then when I started, really taking my faith into action, and I started being intentional with my relationship with my Creator, who I believe created mankind, and started really being intentional about my relationship with Christ, it started changing things for me. Because not only did I allow my relationship with Christ happen and added nourishment to that, it literally pivoted where I was walking in my life. I was going one way, and then strengthening my relationship with the Lord pivoted me to go another way. And once you start going to the other way, which is the way that God wants you to walk, life starts looking a little different.
Right.
And things become difficult. However, you're building that relationship on a strong foundation, that when the storms of life come, you'll be able to withstand that. When I was building my foundation in life, I was building it on sand, which is party life, drugs, alcohol, not the right relationships, not the right friends, avoiding family, avoiding the root issues like
Sure.
So I was building my foundation on sand, and when you build stuff on sand, the storm's going to come in,
Sure.
and what's going to happen? It's going to bring you that building down that you were building.
I'm kind of smiling because it almost sounds like you're saying that religion can be isolating too.
Yeah, it can be.
Okay.
It can be. It can be, because I think that, sometimes really when you get caught up in religion, it just gets too culty for me. And it just gets to a point where there's no relationship. It's just like you got to follow these 10 commandments, or you got to follow these rules, or these things that the Bible says. The Bible is just a friendly reminder that we all fall short.
Right.
And we're never going to be perfect. We're never going to be like Jesus, as long as we're here on earth. So when I take that aside and put that aside for a second and just start, yes, reading scripture, how I could apply my life with the scripture that I read, and not just reading scripture and just going through the things that it's saying, but what is it teaching? And then that'll lead you to a relationship that God wants from you, and then when you build that relationship, you are fruitful. And yes, life is not going to stop being life. You're going to get hit with storms.
Right.
But because you build that solid foundation with having this relationship with the Lord, you're going to be able to withstand those storms. It's going to suck for a little bit, but you'll be able to withstand it and go through it and come out of it a better person, because now you're stronger. You're wiser. And that's something that God is always going to walk you through. He's not only going to lead you, but he's also going to guide you. And then leading and guiding are two different things, because you could be led to something but still get lost on the way. But if he's guiding you, there's going to be detours, right? And you're not going to get lost because he's your guide, right? So he's always your North Star. So yeah, he leads you to a certain way to pivot from one way to another, but he's also going to guide you to where you need to go.
So even the hardships in your life have value.
Exactly.
If God's your God,
yes,
then it means that those hardships have value.
Preach it, Alex. Preach it. So that's I think that's the to tie a ribbon to this conversation. I think that yes, behavior modification is a start, but I think with coming into a sense of spirituality and seeking a higher power, finding meaning, finding purpose, will lead you to better pastures, rather than being in the dark, rather than being in this place of chaos, in this place of animosity and isolation. I think that once you find the way, and in this show I'm going to say that the way is Jesus, I think that your life's going to look a little different. So I just want to encourage everyone listening that get plugged into a cool community, a nice community, a church community. Start there. Alex had mentioned a lot of different practical things to do, like journaling, gratitude, writing down your thoughts
and your feelings,
right?
Trying to find 2 or 3 things that you really want to change short term,
yes,
and then go about doing one a month,
or
one every other month, but move in that direction.
Yeah.
Even if it's something tiny, right? You work all week, and then you have Saturday or Sunday to kind of enjoy yourself. Mm-hmm. Well, if you do nothing, you're going to feel like you wasted the entire weekend, right? But if you do
I usually feel that way.
But if you do one thing, so I talked to Javi on Monday, and I say, Javi, what did you do over the weekend? He looks at me and says, hey, I went to the movies.
Yeah.
I had a great weekend.
Yeah.
And I say, well, Javi, do you really mean you went to the movies for 72 hours? You mean you spent all of Friday, all of Saturday?
Yeah.
No, I went to one movie, Alex.
Right.
But it was the difference between honoring your hard work and doing something fun, or feeling like you wasted it. But you only went to the beach for an hour.
Yeah.
You only went to the movie for 2 hours.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be changing your entire life.
Right.
Just do one thing that'll make you feel more supported, more accepted.
Yeah.
Join a gym. Take an art class. Maybe you've always wanted to learn pottery. Yeah. Do one thing that'll put you into proximity with other people. Right.
Gardening, whatever.
Gardening sometimes, right? It depends on whether there are other people or not. Right. But, definitely a church, any kind of house of worship that puts you in.
Right. In a community.
In a community with other people.
With other people, or even going to like those soup kitchens and being involved with helping
Totally.
the less, you know.
I put in a good 20 years, volunteering at homeless shelters, and
Yeah.
it changed my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, the I guess the message today is just, get plugged into a community, journal. Don't be ashamed of not feeling okay. Don't feel guilty that you're not feeling okay mentally. We encourage you to just seek help. And if you can't seek professional help for XYZ reason, find someone that you can bounce your thoughts
Absolutely.
off of. Maybe an elder at your job, at your school, an elder at your church. Find someone that can that you could feel comfortable confiding in and talking life with, because you never know that person may turn into a mentor.
Sure.
And mentors are always a good thing. I've had a couple along the way, and it's helped me in different seasons of my life. So yeah, guys, just keep fighting the good fight is what I like to say. Don't let a crappy day dictate the rest of your week.
You got it.
And don't let a crappy moment dictate the rest of your life.
Right.
So thank you, Alex, so much.
I'm so glad that you invited me.
I'm
really
glad that
enjoyed
you
it.
came, man. I really, really glad that you came and just dropping some knowledge and being, so open to what you do and what you're passionate for. And we appreciate all the little gems and nuggets of knowledge that you left on this show. So if there's any last parting words that you wanna say before we go.
I would just say, life is about being in light, and light is about not being in darkness. When you're alone and you're isolated, you're in darkness. Reach for the light.
Yeah, reach for the light and be the light.
And be the light if you can.
And be the light if you can. Again, this is Alex, and he has a practice at, and I'll leave his info if it's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'll leave Alex's information on the links below on the YouTube and on the description of the Spotify channel and the Apple channel as well. If you guys wanna, feel free to email him.
Sure.
And he'll be happy to hear from you guys and things like that. And who knows, maybe you can get a consultation with Alex. He's a great guy. I grown to appreciate him, and
Likewise.
And it's been really fun, guys. So again, just a quick reminder: if you guys want to do prayer requests, jump on the Instagram of the podcast show at Kingdomtalks_pod. That's POD, and go ahead and DM me your prayer requests. I do post on the Insta story that we want to hear from you guys in regards to your prayer requests. So keep those coming. Again, check out the website at www.kingdomtalkspodcast.com. Again, I'll leave the links for Alex's contact information on the descriptions below if you're watching it on YouTube, or at the descriptions at your Spotify and Apple applications on your smartphones. Thank you guys for listening, and I think this deserves a round of applause. Yeah. So thank you again, guys. Till next week. Next week again, it's every Wednesday. So we'll see you next week. We got a lot more stuff happening in our show. We're gonna have more guests coming up soon, and so yeah, that's pretty much it. We're out of here. Till next time. Love you guys. Bye.